This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep into a story you might not know about the internment of Japanese Peruvians during World War II.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we'll be looking at this episode from Mr. Hutchings' History called 90 Latin Americans Peru's Wartime Internment.
Oh, okay.
And, a lot of us know about what happened with Japanese Americans being interned here in the U.S., but this time we're looking at Peru.
Fascinating.
Which wasn't even directly involved in the war, so how did this happen?
Yeah, it really is a story about fear, discrimination, and a whole lot of political maneuvering.
Yeah.
And it all kind of starts even before the war, with this tension that was already there.
Oh.
So picture this. Peru, in the years leading up to World War II, they had about 26,000 Japanese Peruvians.
Wow, okay.
Contributing to the economy, all that, but facing all these discriminatory laws.
Like what?
Well, for one, they couldn't become full citizens if their parents weren't born in Peru.
So even if they were born there?
Exactly.
Wow.
Punished for their heritage, basically.
It's like setting them up for division almost.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you've got the press just fueling all this negativity, stereotypes, portraying them as untrustworthy the whole 9 yards.
Yikes. So World War II breaks out.
Right.
That's going to be a powder keg, right?
Exactly. And then the U.S., they're already worried about Japanese influence.
Yeah.
Especially around the Panama Canal.
It's strategically important, yeah.
So they start pressuring Peru and other countries to deal with this perceived Japanese threat.
Right.
Quote unquote.
So you've got that plus the prejudice that was already simmering.
It's
a dangerous combination.
So what did Peru actually do?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. 1942 rolls around.
Okay.
They signed this agreement with the U.S. to deport some of their Japanese population to U.S. internment camps.
To the U.S.?
Yeah.
Wait, seriously? 1,800 people.
Japanese Peruvians sent to U.S. camps.
And many of them, they were born and raised in Peru.
But,
stripped of their citizenship, sent off, declared enemy aliens in the U.S.
That doesn't even...
It's crazy how fear can just, throw rights out the window.
I know. And didn't Peru only declare war in, 45?
You got it.
So for 3 years...
3 years they're interned, and their own country's not even officially at war.
It makes you wonder what was really going on.
Right. Was it just security? Or was there something else at play here?
Yeah, it feels like there's got to be more to it.
You're thinking like a historian.
Yeah.
Because there are actually 4 main ways historians look at this whole Japanese Peruvian internment.
Okay, I'm all ears.
And they each give a pretty different take on what went down.
Lay it on me. What's the first one?
Okay, so the first one is called the security school.
All right.
Basically, historians who follow this idea, they say, look, maybe it seems extreme now, but back then, there were real worries about Japanese spies, sabotage.
Especially with the Panama Canal, yeah.
Right. And the U.S. was breathing down their necks.
Pushing them to act.
So from their point of view, it made sense at the time.
Yeah, in the middle of a war, I can see that. What's the second one?
All right, so the second view is the racial prejudice school.
Okay.
They argue that this wasn't just about wartime stuff. It was about decades of anti-Asian feelings bubbling under the surface.
So the war was almost like a convenient excuse.
Exactly. They were already seen as outsiders, a threat.
Right.
And the war just made it all worse.
It gave them a reason to act on it.
And justify these, really extreme measures.
That's scary how prejudice can work like that. What's number 3?
Okay, so this one's maybe the most interesting.
Okay.
It's called the economic motive school.
Economic motive.
Yeah, so these historians, they're a bit more cynical.
Okay.
They say, look, this wasn't just about security or prejudice. It was about money.
What do you mean?
Well, remember, Japanese Peruvians were doing well in some industries?
Right, like agriculture, you said.
Exactly. And retail, too.
Oh, okay.
So when they're forced out,
it
creates this gap, this opportunity.
And who step in?
And who steps in? Non-Japanese Peruvians.
To take over their businesses?
And their property.
Profiting off of it, basically.
That's their argument, yeah.
So it's like a whole other layer, like financial incentive.
It really adds another dimension to the whole thing, yeah.
Wow, okay. And the last one?
All right, so the last one is the Human Rights School.
Okay.
And they focus on the big injustice of it all.
Yeah.
They say both Peru and the U.S., they basically trampled on these people's rights.
By
denying due process, locking them up just because of their ancestry.
So 4 different perspectives, huh? Each telling a different part of the story.
And it makes it hard to really pinpoint exactly why it all happened.
Like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. It reminds us that history is never just black and white.
Yeah.
It's more like shades of gray, different viewpoints, motivations.
Makes you think, huh?
It does.
So how do we even begin to, untangle all this? What kind of evidence can we look at?
Well, some of the most powerful stuff comes straight from the people who lived it.
The Japanese Peruvians themselves.
Exactly. Their stories, what they went through in the camps.
Yeah.
It's a first-hand look at the human cost of all this.
It must be incredibly difficult for them to talk about that.
For sure. And then you have official records, too.
Like government documents and things like that?
Yeah, from both Peru and the U.S.
Interesting.
They give us a peek into the decisions behind the internment and deportation.
I imagine some of that is pretty revealing.
Absolutely. Some records actually show this very deliberate effort to target people based on their heritage.
Which kind of supports that racial prejudice argument.
It does.
It's like those documents betray the true intentions.
Sometimes.
Is there anything that tells us what happened after the war?
Well, there's this document, the 1947 Treaty of Lima. It sheds some light on what happened to them after, and any efforts to,
To make things right.
Yeah, it talked about repatriation, going back to Peru, maybe settling in other countries.
So there was some recognition that they needed to do something.
Yeah, eventually.
Even if it was a little late.
But for a lot of them, it was too little. Too late.
Yeah, the damage was done.
They'd lost everything.
Homes, businesses, their sense of belonging.
All because of these policies based on fear and discrimination.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. The impact of something like that can last for generations.
So what did happen to them after the war? Did they ever get justice?
Well, that's where things take another turn. So while a lot of Japanese Americans who were interned here, they were allowed to go back home in 45.
Okay.
The Japanese Peruvians, their story went way differently.
What? It gets worse. I mean, they were sent to a whole other country.
It does, yeah. A lot of them were deported to Japan.
To Japan, but Peru was their home.
I know, right? But when Peru sent them to the U.S. and called them enemy aliens, they kind of, abandoned them.
Wow.
And the U.S. didn't see them as citizens.
Right.
So they were stuck.
In this awful limbo.
Exactly.
So just because of their ancestry, they were sent to a country they didn't even know.
Yeah, and they called it repatriation, like they were going back.
It's messed up.
It is. A lot of them had never even been to Japan.
Wow. So what happened to them?
Some did make it back to Peru or found new homes in other parts of Latin America.
Okay.
But a lot of them had to start over in a place that was totally foreign.
It just shows how badly things can go when fear and prejudice take over.
It does.
Did they ever get any recognition for what happened?
It took a long time. It wasn't until the 80s and 90s that Japanese Latin Americans, along with Japanese Americans, started really fighting for reparations.
Decades later.
Yeah, it's a sad truth. And get this, the 1988 Civil Liberties Act in the U.S.
The one with the apologies and reparations for Japanese Americans?
Yeah, that one. It didn't include Japanese Latin Americans.
So they were ignored twice. First with the internment and then again with this.
It's like their suffering was invisible.
It makes you realize how easily people can be forgotten. Did any of them get anything? Any compensation?
Some did, but it was a fight every step of the way.
Of course it was.
Legal battles, bureaucracy, the whole thing.
So even trying to get some justice was a struggle. This whole thing is unbelievable. It makes you think about how quickly things can change, how easily rights can disappear.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that we always got to be on guard, especially when people in power start targeting groups.
Absolutely. And this story, it's like it was hidden for so long.
You know, it makes you wonder how many other stories are out there.
Just waiting to be uncovered.
Exactly. It's our job to find them, listen to those voices.
To learn from what happened.
Exactly. So what are the big lessons here? What can we take away from all this?
Yeah, after going through all this, what did we learn about Japanese Peruvians in World War II?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is how fear and prejudice, mixed with politics and wanting to make a buck,
right.
It can create this, perfect storm.
Where people's rights just get trampled on.
Yeah, it can happen even in places that say they're all about democracy.
Scary thought.
It is. We also have to learn to think critically.
Yeah.
Question things. Don't just accept what people tell us.
Especially when it comes to demonizing entire groups of people.
Because, like we saw, it's usually the most vulnerable who end up paying the price.
Their stories, their experiences, they matter.
They do. We can't let ourselves forget.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave everyone with something to think about. What connections do you see?
Between this, what happened back then, and what's going on today.
With immigration, discrimination, human rights, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question that should really make us stop and think. Because as we've seen, fear and prejudice, they can be used by those in power. And the rights of minorities, they can disappear so fast.
It's like we can't take anything for granted.
And those past injustices, they leave scars that last for generations.
It's a constant reminder that we can't let up.
Right. We all have to be part of making sure those mistakes, they don't happen again.
Whether it's today or in the future.
Exactly.
So for our listeners who want to go deeper into this, learn more.
There's this book, Strangers in the Andes, The Japanese in Peru by Hilary Conroy.
Okay.
It's a really deep dive into Japanese immigration, their whole experience.
And if you want something more personal, there's a documentary, Nikki Legacy, Japanese Peruvians.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
It tells the stories of people who were interned, their families.
Powerful stuff.
Really gives you a sense of the human cost.
Yeah, knowing what happened in the past. It helps us deal with things today,
Totally. And work towards a better future.
Where everyone is treated with dignity.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a part of history a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening.
It definitely was. Until next time, everyone, keep asking questions and keep learning.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.